Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining our session today. I'm Nicole Quain, Digital Marketing Manager at MCI USA, and I'm excited to have with me today 3 event experts from MCI USA Strategic Events, Meetings, and Incentives team. So with me today, we have Anita Burtmeyer, Asma Imam, James Kelly, and Keith McKenna, who will be discussing actionable intelligence, capturing the right data and ignoring the wrong data during event registration. So before we get to it, I have a couple of quick housekeeping notes. We would love to see you. So if you do feel comfortable, we encourage you to turn on your camera. We'd like this presentation to be as interactive as possible. We also welcome your questions and comments. So please use the chat feature throughout the presentation to share your thoughts and ask any questions that you might have. And lastly, this session is being recorded. We will make the recording available to you after the presentation. And with that, I am thrilled to pass it over to our moderator, Keith McKenna, Vice President of Registration and Lead Services at Semini and MCI USA.
Thanks, Nicole. Good afternoon, everybody. And I appreciate you spending your time with us here today. So we're going to go through some of the registration data, some of the highs, some of the lows on things that we find about capturing data, what works best, what we see in the industry, and really where we see it needing to go. So again, the chat feature is right there. So if you have any questions as we're going through, please pop them in there. We will work our best to really fold them into the conversation with these individuals. We have a seasoned staff here. So we are looking forward to a great conversation with you all. So I'm gonna start us out. So we have a lot of data coming in through, and I'm gonna pass it over to Anita to start out. Anita, tell us about where the data is coming from and what you see are the most common data sources being used.
So really, there's multiple data sources that we see data coming from into the registration systems, primarily being the AMS or association management software. We also receive data from speaker resource centers, for example, exhibit sales platforms, sometimes even a flat file. Third-party vendors as well will receive some of that data.
So you guys are using it sounds like a lot of different mechanisms on how that data is coming over. You mentioned flat file. You mentioned some integrations. Asma, from the IT side, do you find any one of those conduits being more challenging than the other?
I would have to say third-party integrations. Anytime we integrate with a company that's not directly managed by the company, but outsourced to somebody else, there I find the most challenge. It's difficult to get them to have the same level of urgency, I would say, as us in trying to get the product done or the integration done. That, and also like establishing a communication with them, because they're not directly affiliated with us. They don't actually, how should I say it, respond in the same manner as they would to the client. That's where I feel the challenge lying. So
they don't have a dog in the hunt, if you will, right?
If you want to put it that way, yes.
Okay. Okay. That's interesting. You know, I've had those conversations myself, and I do find that there have been times where I've had to really leverage the client relationship to really be the strong arm in order to get some of that completed. So, all right. Well, bringing in data, right? Working on registration. James, I'm gonna kind of take it over to you. I want to see, how has data collection changed? You've been in the industry a long time, over 20 years, and being in the industry close to that time myself, I have seen it change. How has it changed in your time in the industry, and what you've seen that's been good, both good and bad?
Thanks, Keith. The big change for me has been that when I first started, we would have all of our registration forms mailed, and for some reason back then they looked like a Scantron sheet as you took your SAT test, with 3 million different types of responses for 40 different questions, and that was just how we did, trade shows and associations, larger events. We asked tons and tons of questions. And then when we built websites, we didn't want to have somebody sit there and go through all that. So we started to pare it down. Well, when we started to pare it down, we got rid of a lot of that great data that people were filling out on that Scantron. And we had this mentality in the industry of show them that we know. We want to make sure that our members and previous attendees of our events, when they come register for our event, we go and we pre-populate. We take their name and phone number, address, different items that we have in our AMS system or in some sort of database, and we pre-populate it. So that's been the biggest change for me, is we went and we grabbed a lot of great data in a very, very difficult manner, where you had a whole, looked like an old smoke shop with a bunch of people sitting around smoking cigarettes, typing in to typewriters to put it into your database, to now having the attendee do that. And when we had the attendee do it, we pulled a lot of that data back so that we could show them what we know them. But, as we're going to talk about here in a little bit, it's led to a lot of the, the buzzwords in our industry. It's led to the APIs and the SSOs and a lot of those things. But we're going to talk about it here in a little bit. That's been the big change of going from a paper form that asks a lot of questions into a website that we were pulling data from different places to show them that we know them. And now we're, as we go through today, talking about where we need to go and what we need to do in the industry.
Okay, awesome. Show them that we know them. I like that. No, everyone likes to feel that they're interacting with a friend, right? So Asma, James is talking about APIs. For those who may not have interacted with that before, it's application programming interface. So being the IT person that we've wrapped into this whole thing, right? Can you talk through what the effect you've seen API integrations have made on how we collect that data?
From a user point of view, I know, like James said, we already have the information on the user. So when somebody logs in, it's a single sign-on. So they log into one platform and we carry that information over. So they don't have to log in every time. Like, we give them the sense of familiarity and like a seamless process where we like, oh, it's you. We know who you are. Here's the information we have on you. You don't have to enter it all over again. We know this about you already. Check if you have the correct information, update if you want, and proceed to checkout. Basically, you're here to register. Let us help you with that process. Not board them with information like, oh, do you mind answering all this information that we have on you already? Stuff like that. So it makes the process seamless for the user. That, and from a software point of view, we have data coming in. We collect or update more data at our end, and then we are able to pass that information back to the client. So they at all times have the most current information relevant to their user or attendee, which they can salvage for the upcoming event going forward, whatever purpose they want to use it for vendors, exhibitors, wherever, they can use that information going forward. And in addition to that, now the data transfer is much more secure. You're no longer sending files in a flat file in an email that anybody can hack. Personal information that may be in a file. That was my favorite aspect of API integration. Like, the data is now secure.
Right. Even passing flat files through, the secure FTP processes and things like that. It is, data security is like big and upfront, right?
Also, it's real time. So it's like you have the information, you're sending it out right away. You don't have to wait till the end of the day or anybody's email, access to some other stuff. No, it's all in your system now.
Awesome. Now, outside of like pre-population and just kind of knowing who they are, what else are you guys doing with that data that you're pulling through in those APIs?
We can use the data for different aspects. Like, we have information gathered on them that we could use for pre-populating some of their responses. The responses that we can capture on their badges when they're on the floor. That way they don't have to answer people, the exhibitor or the vendor, whoever is on the floor can just scan their badge and they have that information available to them. Stuff like that. Also, depending on their information that we have, we can display relevant information on the website that might be of their interest. What else? How much?
So you guys are
Those
passing.
are the main criteria I would say
Okay.
on the website, but on the floor, on the on-site floor, if you're at an event, Anita could probably answer more. What do you do with the data?
Okay, so it sounds like user experience. You're able to change that user experience a little bit for them. Okay. Now I'm gonna transition back over to James here. James, Anita was talking about a lot of different systems. Again, we talked about through the APIs and kind of different plugins on how we're really getting that data. With all these different systems being used, how do you see the alignment of the data sets through those different pieces?
I think for all of our association and meeting planning customers that are sitting here listening today, I think they experience the same thing we do. They're not aligned. It's one of the big problems that we have, that the meeting planners sitting there trying to plan out, how do we do registration? We're talking about registration data. There's so many different data sets that sit within that organization, whether it's sitting in membership, it's sitting in exhibitor sponsor sales, it's sitting in a speaker management tool. There are all these different areas that we have of data, and we don't do a great job internally in our associations of each of these groups. Everybody has their own sacred cow that they're trying to protect, to make sure that membership has what membership needs, and the Sponex group has what they need, and the people that are running content for the organization, they have their system. And what we really struggle with is making sure that when Asma and her team are building these APIs, that the data sets are matching across all of them, making sure, because there's great and rich data that is in each of these things, that if we were able to pull them all into one system, to be able to, you make those connections better. You allow that exhibitor to find the member that they want to speak to. You allow the member to find the session that they want to attend. But because we have these disparate systems, that speaker name is this over in this session, but over in this system it's a different thing. So you have all of these different naming conventions in different systems, and systems that are built by different organizations that don't all speak together. And I think it really is one of those areas, Keith, that we're talking about today, that our customers are really struggling with, and what we at MCI are here to help with. How do we go back and get the data out of our speaker management tool and get it into the registration process easier, faster, better, so that speaker who's coming there to educate your attendees has a fast and easy way to do it. Your exhibitor who's coming in to sell their products and services to your attendees, it's not a long drawn out process. You already have all their information in a Map Your Show or A to Z or whatever system you're using to sell that. Bring all that data over versus just having bits and pieces of it.
Nice. I think the one word that really stood out to me in that I really liked was the enrichment, like the data enrichment, right? Because essentially you have all these parts that you just want to bring together and get the best of what you have. So I like that. I'm gonna steal that and use that in conversations that I have. So I hope you don't mind. I'll footnote it for you, James. Not a problem. Just copyright James Kelly. So while we transition a little bit, because that kind of talks a little bit about kind of the, we've done a really good job in the industry, and I've seen it too, James, and in my time, is that shown that we know getting information that we have, but we might be falling short on really kind of doing all of that with all the systems that we have available. Because it's almost like data collection silos, if you will. It's kind of what it sounds like here. So, Anita, I'm gonna ask you on this. As the contact interacting with the clients directly, what do you see as like the biggest pitfalls on how planners are collecting their data at the current moment?
And kind of what you all led to, having the data in different silos, and you have all that data, let's use it. And if we're asking too many questions of, like Asma referred to, we already know that information from your AMS or from your exhibitor portal, speaker portal. Let's pull that in and use it and build on more conditional and targeted questions for those different audience groups, so that we can provide them the experience that is there for what they're there at your event for. Stay away from questions that are really too general or broad, and really ask yourself before we start asking the questions. Like, no one likes survey questions. If we have that data, again, use it. And before we ask it, what are we going to use it for? Who's going to use that data? If I'm always, I've been at your convention for 5 years, maybe you don't ask me if I'm a first time. But if I'm not, ask me if I'm a first time, but then also ask me, how many years have I been in my industry or that sector? So that way, as a meeting provider, I can target you for finding out, well, maybe you're your first time at my convention, but you have all this experience, you know how conventions work. So you don't really need that education on what to expect in your convention, but maybe you want to foster a first-time attendee because you've been through it and but maybe me not being a first timer, I'm there for more networking or new products or what aren't we doing? Those kinds of things. Obviously, we need to bring over, the privacy policy and GDPR, ADA, but again, why you're asking that information and how you're going to use it. But before you ask other questions, really see, do I need it for this event? Is it specific? Is it going to help my experience?
Okay. Now I put this in the question. I put this question in the chat for kind of everybody on the webinar here. But kind of in your opinion and in your interaction with your client portfolio, do you ever feel that they're being forced to ask questions that they know, like, hey, this is registration, man. I'm just trying to put a badge on someone and get them to a session. Do you ever feel that they're kind of their hands are being forced and asking too many questions?
Sometimes, yeah. And a lot of times I've seen it fall into, well, just in case, like we're still kind of planning stages as it get close, we may, throw this event, kind of trying to gauge interest. Maybe it's something that the board really needs to know. And it could be membership targeted, like how well do you think we're doing as a membership association? Are dues fair? What in your industry, what are some of more looking for opinion? And then some of that, I think it can go back to, maybe that's more your membership system information that you keep on them, because you'll use that more targeted for sessions and things like that, what you would offer people who have been already at the convention. It's like, you attended these kind of a session, maybe these will be interest for this event too. But yeah, I do think sometimes it's just I know the answer, but I got to ask it kind of a thing.
Right. Go tell the Reg guy to ask all these questions.
Yeah.
I've definitely heard that one before too. I think I've been asked that question myself. So, or given that direction myself. So, James, I'm gonna kind of lean on you here. So over the time, we're seeing this theme of, showing we know them, collecting a lot of data, getting a lot of things, talking to each other. What is the downside of casting such a large net and just, collecting as much data as you can get?
I think it does two things, Keith. It really distracts from the attendee getting through the registration process. You've got them there, they have their information in, they just want to give you their money. They want to come to your event. They want to experience something there. So when you ask, you got to keep it simple. You need them to go through, you need to have them answer questions, but they need to be meaningful. We gather so many data points during registration that probably should have been gathered when they became a member of the association. Asma pointed out yesterday as we were talking through some things just about different questions that she has had to program over her years that were in registration. They were very funny to me because I'm like, why would we ask that? Like that should have been something that was captured during membership. Again, we ask these same questions over and over, and we need to keep it simple. Make the process quick. Make them answer questions that aren't going to distract from that process, but also do it all with a purpose and for a reason.
Right, the reg process shouldn't be what they remember.
I don't want them ever to remember the registration
I just want to get there.
Process.
Yes, let's just get them there.
I mean, they're not coming to the show to go through our reg process. I think you're right. I think you're right. Yeah. The last thing that anyone wants to do is go through the reg process. They just want to get to the sessions, the content that the planners have spent so much time and effort to put together, right? Yeah, so I agree with you that that's a joke that we have all the time internally. It's like, nobody wants to go through the reg process, so we need to make it as smart as possible. So it's it's a minimal thing it's a minimal necessity. Get the data you need, that kind of thing. So interesting. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, keeping it simple for sure. So how do we correct this, right? We've done a lot of shifting in the industry over the years. There's more data collected and created on a person in like seconds right now than there's more data collected on somebody in a minute than has been like the rest of their entire life. So knowing that there's so much data and there's this big data churn and this data machine that we're coming up with, and we have ways to leverage it now, how do we fix the problem? And Anita, what can we do to advance like our strategies in this data collection to really get what we need?
I think again, too, your data's there. You've got it in different silos that we talked about. Let's figure out ways to bring it together. If it's through with MCI, through a data hub, to connect all that so that we can provide help build that persona for each one of your members, each one of your members, so that we can target that better, asking the right questions. Why are we going to use it? Who's going to use the data? Do we need it now? Like, stay away from the just in case if it's not going to affect your event right away. Those are just some things. Getting, like Asma referred to, let's get that data back let's make it full circle. We collected the data, any changes that were made, any new data that we asked during the registration process, or even through the event itself, and anything we collect maybe from the mobile app. Let's get all that information back and feed it right back into that AMS. So next year, we can show you how much better we know you.
Okay, great. So I'm going to put this one out to kind of the panel, right? Because I'm sure Asma's itching to talk. I know James is too. What are some examples of data that I should be ignoring? We talked about a lot of data, getting this data, and how to make it succinct for my registration process, and how to leverage that. What are the things I need to be ignoring? Anyone can step up there.
From a registration point, I feel we should not be asking questions that are something the client should have at a membership level. For instance, gender. Unlikely the gender of the person is going to change since the membership to the point where they're attending the registration. So why bother them with that question? Date of birth. That always annoyed me. Why are you asking me a date of birth?
Or my age. If you have my date of birth, you know my age range.
You know my date of birth, don't ask my age. And then some of the others, it gets on the whole, like, it's too personal a question to be relevant for a registration event. Your social security number. You never ask that on a public platform.
No, not unless we're asking the mother's maiden name too, right?
Oh, I was gonna say, yes.
That's a joke, of course, everybody.
Stuff like that. If you need that, keep it at the membership level, not at the registration level. Again, see, the data, it's scattered all over there. These are all personal information that should be siloed in one place. If the client has it, keep it at the membership level. Not if we have that information behind the scenes. If you need it, you can pull it from your membership database. You don't need it for the registration process. Questions like that, I feel we should avoid. We should strictly concentrate on questions that pertain to the event, pertain to improving the experience of the user at the event, help exhibitors or vendors, whoever are there, questions that are overall related to the event, not anything else. What say, James? Anything to add?
No, I think that for me is that we ask the same questions year over year over year over year of the exact same people. Most association events have a repeat of about 60 to 70% of the attendee base. So why are we asking the exact same questions of those same attendees that it's at that, you know, if you have 20% of your attendees are repeat year over year, then yeah, you want to ask those questions. But a large majority of association type events have a great majority of the people that return. So why don't we look at every 2 to 3 years changing up our questions that we're asking? What are we doing in asking these questions that is helping to drive the why of the association? You know, one of the things that we've been talking a lot this year, and this great pause, I've looked at it as the ability to have a great reset for our industry. We have in a year where we only had virtual events. Let's go back and look at the why of our associations and our organizations. Why, when we first founded this association, why? What was the purpose of that first event that we did? Was it to get our constituents together, to share ideas? Was it to get them education? Was it to give, you know, sponsors and exhibitors a way to sell products? What was that original why? And that should be the focus of what we're doing. What was the real reason that association started? You know, go back and make sure that we're asking those questions that drive back to that why, versus just, you know, we're going to repeat it and repeat it. So if it's the same question's been on your registration form for 15 years and it doesn't hit that why, it's got to go. You know, you can get a lot of data from people through other forms besides the registration process throughout the year that you can really go and build those personas. So any data that is not driving to fulfill that why is example of data that needs to be ignored.
I like it. I like it. So making taking each question and giving it a reason to live, right? Putting it out there. So James, we're kind of coming at the end of kind of our path here, because we are gonna open it up to some Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, please go ahead and either put them in the chat, raise your hand. We can take those and field those for you. But just in closing, James, if you had one word that should be really the takeaway from today, what would that be?
I just said why. Why are we capturing the data? And then what are we doing with that data? The why should be, are we capturing this data to help drive interactions and engagement between our attendees to attendees, exhibitors to attendees, and attendees back to that exhibitor? If that data is not being used for, and the other piece, you know, in an association is, how do we also drive membership? We need to use that data for that engagement, but every piece of data is around engagement at different levels. If that data is not being used to do one of those things, and to me, the biggest thing is that engagement in all those different levels. Why? Why are we doing it? Why? What is the purpose of it? And to challenge each other. You know, it's one of the things that I, you know, as you probably can tell, I'm very outspoken of how, you know, it's one of my little soapboxes that sits under here, under my desk. But let's challenge each other in our industry. Let's stop doing what we've always done. We need to make it better. Our events, as we've had this pause, we haven't been able to have that face-to-face interaction with each other. And as we get back to it, let's make sure that that engagement is at the highest level that it could ever be, and really use the data that we're capturing in registration in our AMS system to help drive that engagement between our attendees to one another and our exhibitors back to those attendees.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. James, Anita, Asma, I love it. I love when we get together and talk about reg, right? You know, reg and data. reg is data. And and really to use that to our advantage to really move us all forward. So
yeah,
I think that's what we have here. Nicole, I'm going to pass it back to you, and we can move into a Q&A. So if anybody has any questions for one of our panelists, to field for you.
Excellent. Feel free, guys, to use the chat feature to ask your questions. I could sort of kick it off and ask a question to the panel here. What advice would you give to someone who's hosting an event for a first time, right? So they might not have as much historical knowledge as to what data would be important for that event, but sort of keeping in mind perhaps, the competitions, similar events, similar audiences. What advice would you give to an association who's really trying to maximize their data at a first go at an event?
for me, Nicole, it's back at that why. What we're trying to drive with this registration data is engagement. So you need to figure out when you're setting up that registration page for the first time, what are the answers that I want to get? Not what are the questions I'm going to ask. What are the answers I want to have? What are the answers that I want to give to our exhibitors about our attendees? What's the information about our speakers that I want to have? So being able to go and figure out what are the data pieces that are going to drive business in our market, that's what I need to find out. Because it does two things. It drives that engagement, but it also helps you in the future years. I've had in my career where we've added additional registration questions, and all of a sudden that were around product categories. What product category are you interested in seeing at this event? And it ties to trade shows. And what would happen is all of a sudden the customer would realize that we have 50% of our attendees are asking to see these certain products, and we have less than 10% of our exhibit floor. So a lot of times in the registration process, you need to ask questions that are going to help with your exhibitor prospectus. I've always felt the best way to do things is to take those registration demographics and put them into the exhibitor prospectus. And then also take those lead retrieval reports that you're getting and then have all that registration data. So you have two sets of data that come out of your event. You have your registration data, but then you also have the lead and session data that have all those demographics back. And those two sets of data on that session and lead side show what actually people did. So there's been some very interesting things in my career to see that people that went and scanned on an exhibit floor sometimes are very different overall as a population than what we had as full registrants. So using both of those data sets to help drive those areas of business would be my recommendation. Find out the answers that your exhibitors want to have and that you as an organization want to have, and not what that question is, but what the answers are.
Excellent. And I guess also from a sponsor perspective, right? If you're doing an event for the first time, I would believe that why could also drive sort of setting those expectations from sponsors, and sort of, can you maybe elaborate more on that perspective?
Especially on a first time event, and I've had the pleasure or unfortunate pleasure of trying to sell first time events that have never happened in a new space that, and trying to understand from those sponsors and exhibitors I'm out talking to, who do you want to see here? And making sure that during the registration process, and you say, that's our target market, that's who we have, but you don't know until you get that registration data if you're actually hitting that target market that exhibitor and sponsor really want to have. So making sure that if you're hearing, your sales team is hearing, this is who we want to see, that you're making sure that you're asking during the registration process, do you fall into one of these categories? And it's a huge benefit for the exhibitor sponsor team if they keep hearing the same category over and over and over. And we can go back and look at reg data. Oh, we have 80% of our registrants that fall into the category that you're interested in. That all of a sudden makes the sales process much, much easier. But again, it's using that registration data to answer that, to answer that question for them.
Excellent.
Right. And I think be able to tell those attendees too, like, hey, based on what you've told us, these are, so some suggested places that you should visit, your top 5, to put those in there. And Nicole, just to kind of piggyback on what James was talking about too, if it's a first timer, and again, even if it's not a first time event, just make sure your questions are purposeful, actionable. How am I going to use it? Your data is a tool, and we want to use that tool to make sure that your event fosters a great experience for both your attendees, your exhibitors, as well as your sponsors and your speakers. So just bring it full circle.
Excellent. Asma, do you have anything to add?
From a registration point, again, if it's a first timer, keep it simple and ask, like they said, the pertinent questions. You don't have to have the most fanciest integrations if you don't have one. Just design the site the way you need it to function. It's nice to have the AMS integration, don't get me wrong. I love having to do that, But if you don't have it, that's fine too. You can still have a successful event without that.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, James, Keith, Asma, Anita, thank you each so much for joining us today. And thank you all in the audience for coming to this presentation. And hopefully you have some great key takeaways when you're considering registration for your events. For more insights, we encourage you to visit our website at mcigroup.com/insights. And thank you for letting us help shape your tomorrow. And we hope you all have an excellent day. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks,
Nicole.
everyone.